Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Bonadonna, and I'm super happy to welcome you on our another brilliant Academy session. And today we have a half podcast mode. So I have a kind of incognito speaker. So we know who is he, but we cannot see him. Hi, Misha, how are you?
Hi, Eileen. I'm good. Hi, everybody. Good evening, good morning, wherever you're located. I unfortunately I cannot share my face with you because I have an issue with the computer and I haven't been able to fix it. The computer doesn't recognize my camera, so I apologize in advance. I will be incognito, like Alina said, but we'll be happy to talk to you and present share my some of the ideas with you.
Yeah, guys, no worries, Misha. It will be an amazing session anyway. I promise you that we will have a lot of tricky questions, and I'm definitely sure that there will be a reason for these questions. But guys, the question I always ask you is the same. Just let me know if you see me well, hear us well, so we can start and shoot on you the most important topic as always. Actually, every session is coming with important topics. Yes, I see first reactions, and would be happy also to know from where you are listening to us because I'm currently based in Zurich. And Misha, where are you now?
I'm currently based in Washington, D.C. in the United States.
Lovely. So as always, we are gathering quite a huge diversity of time zones. So good morning to those who has morning, good evening to those who has evening. And Misha, if you are ready, we can start.
That sounds good. I'll start with the beginning. Today we will be talking about the exciting topic, exciting for me, exciting for my organization that I represent, and we will deal with how to enter new markets using improved food safety. And we'll focus specifically on smallholder farmers because this is the type of audience that my organization works with. If we can start with the first slide, please. The first one when I present myself. Next slide, please.
Mhm.
Okay, as I said, my name is Misha Voronenko. I am originally from Russia, but have lived in the United States for a while. I have as I said, I'm currently based in Washington D.C. and I work for an organization called CARE US. My title is I'm a senior technical advisor for market systems, food safety, and certification, and I'm also a certified registered trainer for Global G.A.P. I'm sure if you're dealing with food safety, you know about Global G.A.P. And the exciting certification ideas that they have to present to the world. I to tell you a little bit about CARE. CARE is a U.S. It's an international NGO, but the largest member of this NGO is based in the U.S. A lot of our work is around the world. We're currently in more than 90 countries globally. We have programs where we assist. Lesser developed economies, lesser developed poorer countries with various different needs. My unit specifically focuses on working with smallholder farmers because we believe that the food is people around the world have a right to safe and nutritious foods, and of course, smallholder farmers play a huge role in that. We will talk a little bit about that. CARE is one of the oldest NGOs in the world. For those of you who don't know, NGO is a non-governmental organization. We have been around since 1945, where we helped deliver. In 1945, we started delivering food to the decimated and recently destroyed areas of Europe after World War II, and that's how our organization started with these acts. And now we do a lot more than just deliver food. We work with, like I said, with poorer people, building their capacity to be able to help themselves build their own better future. And we currently working with over 50 million people worldwide. Next slide. Why does an organization like CARE focus on food safety? We believe, like I said, that people around the world have the right to safe and nutritious food, and you cannot have safe and nutritious food without dealing with food safety. Food safety is a very important topic because according to WHO, World Health Organization, currently there are an estimated 600 million people, which is basically almost 1 in 10 people in the world, fall ill after eating contaminated food. If it's a really large number, and if you think about it, it's this number of people is probably larger because a lot of the foodborne diseases go unreported. So this is just the number that gets reported around the world, and an estimated 420,000 people die every year. So it's a size of a medium-sized city. They die every year from foodborne illnesses. And those are, again, just the reported numbers. In addition to the human cost, to the health cost, we have economic cost as well. 110 billion in US equivalent of US dollars is lost each year in productivity and medical expenses around the world. So it's people who cannot come to work due to health reasons. That's lost not just on the national economic level, but also on the personal level, on the level of households. And this is especially felt in low to middle income countries, a lot more than in higher income countries. And the children bear a large portion of that burden. They're under children under 5 carry about 40% of the total foodborne disease burden, and more than 125,000 children die every year. So you can see that food safety or unsafe food causes a lot of economic and safe and human costs. But there's a good news, and for me the good news is always is connected to the markets, because as you know, consumers around the world, especially in the starting with the higher income countries, but increasingly in the lower income countries as well, they choose to learn about healthier food, and they choose to learn how to choose healthier foods. They understand what healthier food means. They understand more how to select healthier food, and they decide to spend sometimes more money on the food that will cause less disease for them. So the consumers are driving the change, and of course, the companies around the world, they also choose to follow suit with that. Next slide. Sorry, I think I didn't say next slide, and we're one slide ahead. One slide ahead. One more slide, please. Yes. A lot of the work that we do with food safety has to do with certification. Why do we want to focus on certification? Is because certification is a way for farmers, in our case, to get recognized by the market as providers of healthier foods. You can see that I've listed some of the most common certifications that are used around the world. There are many more. This is just as just a samples. For smallholder farmers, obtaining certification enhances market access, and because it instills confidence in stakeholders, and especially in consumers and also in buyers in buyers down the supply chain. So if the entire supply chain feels safe and secure about procuring the food from the source, from the farmer, it means higher income for the farmers. It means safer food for the consumer. The farmers, of course, safer food means that there's some sort of a compliance with food industry standards, and it opens door for farmers to new opportunities and to new partnerships in the private sector. Um, and we, as an organization, care. We assist farmers with tools to get better access to markets, and we look for buyers with local and international certification because we treat it as a proof that the farmer product is of quality that the market needs, that the market seeks. Next slide, please. How does so the conversation usually goes around how does the food safety relate to accessing markets, right? Because there's some people don't see it more of a health issue, and for a long time, even in the higher income countries, accessing markets and dealing with health, they were not one and the same. There was a difference between them. Especially especially if you come from a free market background, you think, why do I need to focus on food safety at all? It is up to consumers to get educated on what foods on what they would want to eat. It is my job to provide them with the cheapest possible solution to their food needs and not necessarily to their health needs. But there is of course a very important connection which we will talk about. If you can go to the next slide, please. So market access for smallholders. When we talk about the relationship between food safety and markets, smallholders play a very important role in the world's economy, and they're basically we say that the smallholders feed the world because they produce approximately 1/3 of the world's food, and that becomes very much more important once you get to the lower income countries, but also in higher income countries, smallholders play a very important role. So enhancing the productivity and food quality is key to lifting them out of poverty. Of course, this is our concern as an organization is to lift people out of poverty, but also feeding the world is very important. And the companies, larger companies, smaller companies, small and medium enterprises, they recognize that the importance of smallholder farmers as providers of safe and nutritious foods to the consumer. And better food safety practices allow smallholders to meet the stringent requirements of the market, especially in higher value segment, such as exports and premium domestic sectors, directly increasing the income potential for the smallholder farmers. Which is to say that the smallholders are becoming and have always been a very important part of the supply chain for food companies around the world. And here you can see a photo of the case that I will talk about. That's sun-dried tomatoes in Egypt. I will talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation. How to give you an example of what we do with smallholder farmers and food safety. And the last thing to say about the connection between food safety and markets is that food safety is essentially an integral part of food quality. And if you are a consumer who pay attention to food quality more than any other aspects, if you're not entirely price driven, that is, then food safety becomes extremely important because it's not just about packaging. It's not just about the way the food tastes or it smells. It's also about how safe it is. It all determines quality of the final product. Next slide, please. So whenever we work with farmers and whenever we talk about quality and thereby food safety, we talk about a model that's called route to markets. The term route to market comes from the logistics industry, and of course, as you know, logistics is essentially a management of the supply chain. And we also treat food safety as a supply chain issue, and therefore, smallholder farmers who are trying to become a stronger market player and deliver their food to higher paying customer need to understand the entire supply chain. Not to bore you with all of the details, but essentially we break the route to market into four parts. Four parts is the first, you deal with research and selection of the product that you want to put into the market. Then you need to align your product with the requirements of the market, which we call market channel alignment. You have to choose a specific channel and which your product will go through. Then the smallholders necessarily engages in sales and marketing with the output markets. And of course, at the very end of this route is the long-term sustainability planning, which you have to adjust to the you live and you learn. To explain a little bit in more detail, what this means is that during the first step, during the research and selection step, farmers need to understand what market demand is and what the consumer preferences for each market segments are. So basically, you have to look at the markets and you say, okay, so we're producing potatoes at the moment, but we did market research and we see that the consumers really want sweet potatoes more. So maybe I need to research that market and to see if I can plant sweet potatoes instead of potatoes, which the market doesn't want at the moment. So, which means that you have selected your product and you've done a little bit of planning around that product. And then you do a profitability analysis to say, okay, so now that I've selected my product that I want to put into the market, does it make financial sense for me to do this? And if the investment into the sweet potatoes is not going to justify the income that they will receive, then maybe perhaps this you need to go back to doing market analysis and look at other opportunities. So you have to do a bit of financial planning because without that it doesn't make sense. When you talk about market channel alignment, there are several aspects to that you need to think about before you start working on your new product and introducing it into the market. You have to look at whether you will be able to get the inputs necessary for your production. So if you're doing sweet potatoes, you have to ask yourself questions about do I have seeds? Do I have access to the necessary seeds? Do I have the access to necessary technologies to be able to grow my food in a manner that the consumer wants? Do I have the proper handling, harvest and post-harvest handling organized? Do I have the necessary storage and inventory? Is my transportation and logistics aligned at the moment? And do I have a proper distribution strategy? Meaning that do I have connection with the transportation service providers? Do I have connection with the wholesale market, etc.? And will they be able to deliver the good that I'm selling to the end market that is going to pay me premium for better quality food? Next, you'll look at the sales and marketing, and this is where you do most of the quality control, packaging and labeling, marketing and branding, and customer relations management. All of those become considerations. And of course, the last step is long-term sustainability planning. This is where you look and you look at your first sales and you decide whether the strategy that you have chosen to put the product on the market was the right one, whether your product that you put into the market was the right one, and whether you need to do any necessary adjustments and do some risk management and contingency planning at this phase. Why this process is important is because if you use this model to plan your access to market, to plan your market entry strategy, you have to think of quality control along each of those steps. And food safety becomes an integral part for every one of those steps and every one of those sub-steps. So basically, if you're thinking about product selection and planning and profitability analysis, you have to include food safety into that. If you're talking about your input supplies, you have to think of that as well. For example, if you're doing any kind of certification such as Global G.A.P, you have to think you gotta think about whether the source for my inputs is safe, because you have to make sure that you as a producer, you also control your own supply chain, right? Not just the supply chain that goes from your product to the end market, but also of all of the supplies that come into that you also buy as an input as inputs. Because if you purchase something from an unsafe source, chances are that the product that you will produce is also going to be unsafe. And of course, you have to remember that inputs don't only include the seeds and fertilizers, but you have to also include water. You have to include your pesticides, and all of these carry risks associated with foodborne illnesses and food poisoning as well. So you have to manage those. You have to do food safety management for fertilizer management. You have to do water management, wastewater management, etc. All of those aspects carry food safety risks. Next slide, please. So just to summarize all that, you can see that market access depends on compliance with food safety protocols. And if you're a formal producer, we work a lot with producers that are informal, basically, which means that they are not registered in the country, and their markets are also very informal. So whenever you deal with informal markets, this becomes much more difficult and blurry. But if you want to, as a producer, if you want to get better price for your product, then you have to think about formal markets, and therefore you have to comply with formal markets requirements. And I'm not only talking about exports, I'm also talking about formal domestic markets. It's also very, very important because even in the poorer countries, there are some formal market requirements, and there are some formal food safety protocols. Enforcement is an issue, of course, but if you're really serious about being a good player and in the market, you have to think about compliance. Second important aspect is that, of course, food safety enhances consumer confidence. Consumers are quick to learn, and if I buy something in the store, or if I buy a product that makes me sick, I'm not likely to buy this product again. I will likely look for a substitute for something and I will look at the competitor that will provide me with safer food. So meaning that if you as a supplier of food to the market learn to fulfill food safety protocols and control your supply chain, that will result in a stronger consumer confidence, which means that you will have repeat customers coming back to buy your product. Next aspect is certification and quality assurance schemes that facilitate market entry. For example, if you want to enter, if you're a smallholder farmer based in Nicaragua or in Morocco, and you want to enter European market, you have to obtain some sort of a formal certification such as Global G.A.P, because Global G.A.P covers all of the market entry aspects of the European legislation, for example. if you want to acquire Global G.A.P, you have to change your practices, and this will facilitate entry into those markets. Um, and you can use food safety as competitive advantage because consumers around the world are increasingly aware of different requirements and different food safety protocols, and they demand safe and traceable food products, right? So they want to make sure that they buy safe foods. Of course, a lot of it is not only consumer driven. Consumer is important, but in the name of the consumer, it's also driven by the private sector, which are trying to gain their own competitive advantage by making their own supply chain safe, not just to be compliant, but also to gain edge over their competitors. So even the supermarkets themselves, they demand that the supply of the food that comes on their shelves is much more safe. Next slide, please. To tell you how we work with smallholder farmers, this conversation will not be complete without talking about certifications, and I've chosen Global G.A.P because this is the organization that we work closely with, and it's the one that has come up quite a bit in our conversations with smallholder farmers. That's why we'll focus a lot on Global G.A.P. As if you're not a food safety if you're a food safety if you're a food market actor who plays in the European market, you will know what Global G.A.P is. But for those of you who are not, just to tell you a little bit, Global G.A.P is designed to comply with the requirements by many markets in the EU and increasingly in other markets. For example, in countries like New Zealand or Australia, whenever they work with producers from other countries, they say, well, if you're compliant with Global G.A.P, you can also gain access to our markets, right? So it's not just Europe, it's also other markets, and in the U.S. too. Global G.A.P is gaining recognition, although slowly, but slowly but surely it is gaining recognition. So if you and then it's one of the currently it's one of the 13 certification program owners that are recognized by Global Food Safety Initiative around the world. So Global Food Safety Initiative, as you may know, is the organization that sets standards for the food industry in terms of food safety. And they recognize food safety certification program owners, such as Global G.A.P, that recognition gives them legitimacy, and you can see that the Global G.A.P is only one of 13 schemes around the world that have that recognition. And 13 is definitely not that many, because there are many more. I don't know the exact number of international certification schemes, but there's definitely more than 30 to 40 certification programs, and so 13 is a very elite numbers. Next slide. Global G.A.P in a nutshell is not driven by the government. It's driven by food industry themselves. You know, the history of that certification is that some supermarkets in Europe at some point in 1990s came together, and they decided to launch a program to control supply of foods to their shelves. They came up with something called Europe G.A.P. And later that Europe G.A.P was replaced by Global G.A.P, which means basically that the supply of foods to Europe comes not just from European farmers, but also from farmers around the world. And it is consumer focused. There are other certification schemes that are more concerned with the producers, such as Fairtrade, for example. But Global G.A.P is very explicitly concerned with consumers and their safety. Global G.A.P is not mandatory to enter the EU. I don't want to confuse people by saying it is a mandatory requirement for EU. but it is highly recommended. Basically, it means that if you don't do global gap as a producer, you have to comply with a multitude of different standards required by European legislation. You have to go through the legislations and look for the requirements, and it's a very costly effort. So it is a lot easier for you as a producer to just focus on global gap, because global gap will tell you exactly what to do on the farm level, for you to comply with food safety regulations of at the European level, but also the national level of some of the countries. This scheme, yeah, and it's rapidly growing, like I said, as one of the most widely accepted industry standards in the world, which also means that a lot of the other standards that are national are used. They use Global Gap to set their own standards. So for example, I don't know, in Thailand, Thai Gap looks at Global Gap, and they adapt it to the Thai legislation, which is basically tweaking it a little bit, but they use it as a benchmark. You can receive Global Gap certification both as an individual producer, but also you can do it as a part of your as if you're only if you're part of a cooperative or other producer organization. Okay, so certification doesn't give you a formal label, so it's not consumer faced, as we say. It gives you a number that basically supermarkets will have access to, and they will look at they will search their database, and they will find your product in their database. So the consumer doesn't know that your product is a Global Gap certified, but the supermarket does. So the consumer trusts the supermarket, and the supermarket guarantees food safety by ensuring that every product that gets to their shelf is Global Gap certified. That's how it works. There is a label. It's very new, so there are some products that the consumer will see as Global Gap certified, but that label is very new. It only exists for a very few products, and getting that label requires more steps. So basically, the organization that promotes Global Gap currently is playing with the consumer-facing label, and we still don't know how it's gonna go, whether it will be accepted by the consumers around the world or not. Next slide, please. Um, yes, thank you. Yeah, this slide. So to tell you what products can get certified with Global Gap, you can see that the majority of the products are plants. So it's so a great the producers who work with plants will be overly represented in this by the standard, but there's also some livestock currently. I think that the Global Gap will drop livestock soon, but currently it still works with livestock. And aquaculture is also a pretty sizable chunk of everybody who gets Global Gap recognition. Next slide. And before I finish my presentation, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our work with Global Gap and with smallholder farmers. Just to tell you a story, we worked in Egypt, where farmers produced tomatoes, and they mostly produced them very informally for the local market, selling at very low prices, as many smallholder farmers in developing countries do. So our program approached them with an idea that perhaps we can work with farmers, and perhaps we can get them raise their standards of the tomatoes that they produce, so that they can sun dry tomatoes and sell it into higher paying markets. And the farmers liked the idea, and that basically started a conversation with us, Global Gap, and the farmers. So currently, the farmers, they own their own production individually, but they've also joined the cooperative that was set by our organization to be able to process the tomatoes into the sun-dried tomatoes. So our organization in Egypt was a legal owner of that cooperative. And the farmers got trained on Global Gap certification on various practices by Global Gap by a local consulting firm called Blue Moon, and and then they got at the end of the training, they went through a couple of rounds of audit, and they have been able to pass the audit collectively, and they received the recognition by Global Gap uh, by a certifying body called High Assert, which is one of the bodies registered in Egypt. Um, the after they get their certification, they were able to put their product, the raw tomatoes, into the processing factory owned by Care in Egypt. That processed the raw tomatoes into a drying facility, through drying facilities into dried tomatoes. Um, the facility itself, just to be sure, does not need to have the Global Gap certification, but the raw product did. And because of that, we were able to make agreements with some of the buyers, some of the buyers that took the sun-dried tomatoes for exports, and they were able to export the sun-dried tomatoes to such markets as EU or Brazil, which basically boosted the incomes of those farmers manyfold. It's a very different price that they received for their sun-dried tomatoes than previously owned. So you can see that having paid attention to food safety and other quality aspects, they were able to boost their incomes, and it was at the end of it was really good, and they've learned a lot about how formal markets function, because they did not even know about the some of the previous practices. And one of the most common questions that I get is that doesn't it cost a lot? It really depends. I think switching to the new practices was something that we needed to convince the farmers to do. They needed to pay more attention to how they manage their pesticides, how they manage their herbicides, how they manage their water supply, how they organize their farming. But at the end of the day, they were actually able to save money, because managing pesticides in a more efficient manner was able to save them money, rather than have them waste more money. So it was a good exercise, and the farmers learned a lot in the process. With this, I end my presentation, and let's go into questions.
Back soon, already came back. Yeah, thank you so much, Misha, for such cool presentation. I really loved it, and I already have some questions. Guys, encourage you to drop in questions until I didn't take the whole time just for myself, because this topic is really super important to me personally, and also the area where I'm currently working. First question. What are generally the most common foodborne pathogens which are occurring, unfortunately, in these low-income countries? Is there any statistics?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Statistics on what?
Yeah, sure. So basically, is there any statistics? What are the most common foodborne pathogen diseases and outbreaks which occurred in these low-income countries?
Um, it really well. It really depends on the country, right? Because it's such a wide variety of different issues. Of course, the issues that we have in the developed countries are very much the same in there as well. So all of the usual suspects, such as listeria, salmonella, and all of those are much more prevalent. And it's that our food safety system in our countries, and for those of us who live in developed and higher income countries, has already been organized to assure that a lot of the common diseases are eliminated from the system. In lower income countries, they're still present. So basically, you can get food poisoned from something very common that we don't have anymore. A variety of bacteria, a lot of the parasites too. So there's the Giardia, for example, is a lot more present there than in Europe or in the United States, etc. Right? Plus people get sick from just really poor practices. For example, there's a story of people getting poisoned by cooking their in Kenya. There was a case when people used motor oil as cooking oil, and of course, a lot of people just got sick and died. So things like that don't normally occur in countries such as the United States, but they do. Other practices are we worked in Nepal where where people pay more. People think because there's no effective food safety control systems. People rely on their smell, on the visual aspects. So they think that if the food is looking good, if it looks red, or if the meat looks red or the fruit looks red and green, bright, that it means that the food is safe. So a lot of the sellers in those countries, they paint food, so people eat painted food, and that generates a lot. That's a huge food safety risk, and those are real stories, that come from a lot of the real work that we've done, and getting overcoming those practices is extremely important.
Yeah, and it's really very important to understand first of all what you pointed in your presentation, that yeah, definitely cases in low income countries and high income countries are not the same, but still the education behind it's still the same kind of, because consumers are not aware of how to behave, right?
That's
And
true.
yeah, and in general, for example, if we are still referring to low-income countries, how can government improve surveillance and data collection on foodborne illnesses, and especially in regions with the low health infrastructure?
We Well, governments are the good news is that the governments are trying to do something, and it's they don't always have the capacity. I mentioned that the enforcement aspect is probably the weakest aspect, but they governments are increasingly adapting food codes that are based on Codex Alimentarius and on the standards dictated by GFSI. So if you look at legislation of pretty much every country that has adopted legislation like that, they will be very international in nature, right? So it's going to be very similar to what we have in the United States. Maybe not as stringent as the United States, but there will be halfway there, or more than halfway there. So, like I said, the enforcement is probably the number one issue. It's not the actual laws and rules and regulations. Also, practices by the private sector, by supermarkets, they're not yet there. Let's say that, like I said, the Global G.A.P was started by European supermarkets. They were not required by the governments to do that. They just themselves got together and they say, "Hey, we need a better standard." But and some of the supermarkets in the developing countries, they are beginning to do that. Um, Even I recently came from Uganda, where the food industry is beginning to play a much larger role in controlling the safety of the food that comes to them. Uh, uh, for now, it's just at the level of higher income markets in larger cities, but it is changing. Because if you went to Uganda 10 years ago, even that wouldn't be there. So it is changing, It's changing. It's changing slower than Europe or United States, but it is changing. It's going in that direction. The trend in the world is for safer food, so they're catching up. And some countries are catching up a lot faster than others. For example, in Colombia, we're working with the Food Safety Authority, which is part of our programs, where Food Safety Authority goes with us to the smallholder farmer communities, and they themselves educate the smallholder farmers on what to do and how to provide better food. Uh, but consumer education is important. But I think what's even it's a debate, right? It's a debate. What's more important, educating the consumer or educating private companies, private sector about what to do? Because a lot of the times, if I talk to somebody who doesn't know much about food safety, but they know that they want safer food, but they don't know how to tell safer food from unsafer food. They just rely on the integrity of the retail outlet where they go to buy their food. They say, "Oh yeah, I trust I don't know Trader Joe's. I trust Whole Foods. Those are supermarkets in the U.S. I trust those more, and I know that the food that comes from there doesn't is not going to make me sick." They're not going to know whether this food is controlled for listeria or there's some kind of biological lab testing that's been done. They have no idea. So it is. I think it's a lot. It's just as important to educate private companies on their practices and farmers to educate them on what they do as it is to educate the consumer.
Definitely 100%. And there is actually a question coming from Julia Nissen regarding what you mentioned actually. How do you ensure that the requirements of the certification are upheld by the producers?
Well, because you go through the audit. If in case of Global Gap, all the farmers need to go. If you're certified, you have to go through an audit. In order to get certification, you go through an audit, which is very rigorous. They go to your farm. They look at your practices. They look at what you do around food handling. They look at what you do around hygiene of everybody who's involved in food handling. And if you want to maintain your certification status, you have to go through the audit each year. And you have to do self-audit as well. So it's by the requirement by the Global Gap is that the farmer, first of all, self-reports, but also the external auditor also they review periodically each year in case of Global Gap. Of course, there's no way to ensure that oh yeah, they're not gonna go and screw up a couple of times a year. I'm sure there is a risk of that, but at least with the audit, there's stringent requirements that are placed, and the auditor will observe them, and they will know if something happens, and let's say that there's an outbreak and it's traced back to your farm, because of course traceability is part of the of certification. If they trace it back to your farm and you haven't reported it, you may, they may issue a non-compliance, a non-conformance, or even there's non-conformance and there's non-compliance. They will issue you a letter of non-conformance, and you will have to correct it within a very short period of time. If not, your certification status will be taken from you. So those are some of the controls that are in place in the system.
Yeah, thank you so much. So basically, the best way to ensure that everything is done properly is to control.
Exactly, yeah. So basically, you have to maintain practices and be faithful. But
Yeah,
it's really interesting because I think that the farmers that we work with, we see that they really like the new practices. They feel proud, right? They're supplying food to higher paying market. They're really proud in what they do. They don't want to risk that and just go back on what they did before. I don't think they can. They really their mind is already different.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm also curious, like, are there any public awareness campaigns tailored to improve food safety knowledge, maybe done by CARE, for example?
We do that, but we don't have the resources to necessarily go with the public awareness. Like I said, we target farmers, and I think that's we effectively do the same thing. Um, and I feel like a lot of the supermarkets in the developing countries, they also do their job, right? They want to make sure that people, because people there will very quickly they will learn. The word of mouth in countries, the institution of word of mouth in developing countries is a lot stronger than in the developed countries, because that's the mechanism people have to rely on, right? So if they go, oh,
Mhm.
we went to Tesco in I don't know, in Senegal, and people got sick. And some people were really sick. They couldn't go to work. People will learn about this quickly without any public awareness campaigns by the government, right? And they will not go back to Tesco. They will go back to the open air markets that they relied on before. So it is, so Tesco has to control their supply chain in Senegal just as much as they do anywhere else. And I'm talking about, and when I say Tesco, it could be a local supermarket chain too. It's the same
Yeah,
behavior.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And do you see somehow the huge influence of technology, let's say of AI, because everyone is talking about AI and everyone wants to implement it, and somehow people think that it's like a magic pill against all disease, sicknesses, and everything. So can it help somehow to improve food safety culture, food safety in general, and help smallholder farmers to improve food safety in general?
Technology, I'm not sure necessarily about AI, but a lot of the technology is going into food safety. Many examples, I'll give you a couple. One example is traceability. Of course, you have to be able to trace the product all the way back if you want to do any kind of recall, all the way back to the source, all the way back to the farm. And a lot of the traceability is done online. It's done in the cloud. It's done by blockchain. So it's not necessarily AI, but it's one of the technologies that essentially helps trace the product back, because you can see there are traceability apps that use blockchain methodology to do that. That's one. Another aspect is the use of drones, both ground-based drones, but also flyover drones that can help look at the fields, look at your crops, look at the neighboring areas. For example, part of the global gap requirements have to do with biodiversity, and they have to do with ecosystems. It's not just food safety. And the drones can definitely look at the fields, and they take photographs of all the surrounding areas, and they see if your area has been recently deforested or not. I mean, it goes beyond food safety, but yeah, it's the use of drones is developing really, really quickly in agriculture, and I'm sure it's gonna come to food safety as well.
Yeah, definitely. And uh, I don't see any more questions coming, but what I would love you, Misha, to do is to kind of share your maybe top three important quotes which we could summarize our session today.
From this presentation.
Yes, from this presentation.
Okay, I would say that food safety is essential for market access. That would be probably my top quote. I would say that certification is a good way to ensure that your product is safe, and that it's a good way for market to acknowledge the safety of the product that you produce. And the top three quote is that please be respectful and loving to your safe smallholder farmer, because they really feed you.
Yeah, definitely. And subscribe to Nemis Academy future webinars.
And please do that too. Yes. And I
Yeah,
know that,
thank you.
yes, you're welcome. I know that it's your usual presentations are much more scientific in nature, so this is a lot more markets oriented. And I really appreciate everybody who joined this webinar as well.
Look, we are also from time to time talking about product recalls and in general about food safety culture. So this is something that, on my opinion, we have to highlight as well. That's something very important to bring in. And actually mention that I want to invite you guys for our next session next week, where we will kind of summarize our 2024 year season of Academy webinars with Darren Detwiller, and we will go through every single recall happened this year. So it will not be longer than 1 hour, but still it will be also a long discussion. So Misha, of course, you are also invited if you want to drop in like these trickiest questions. Don't use this opportunity as well.
I will definitely do that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so let's give some more nice reactions to Misha. Thank you so much for sharing with us these insights. And thank you everyone who is following every single session and recommends our academy and encourages me personally to bring really the biggest and the greatest experts in the food safety industry. I wish you all a lovely evening and lovely morning and day, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.